All right, let's dive into the economic turbulence caused by tariffs during Trump's trade wars. They definitely created ripple effects across the economy. First off, tariffs increased the cost of imported goods, and that put businesses and honestly consumers too under substantial pressure. I mean, when your raw materials cost more, production slows down, spending tightens, it's a perfect storm for GDP growth to take a hit.
Sure, but that's the trade-off, right? Protecting domestic industries ain't free. You gotta take a hit somewhere. But it's about boosting the long-term competitiveness of U.S. manufacturers. Folks here have been losing jobs to, say, Chinese imports for years. So yeah, there was fallout. But at least we started backing American workers for once.
I see your point, but the costs weren't evenly distributed. Take the manufacturing sector. Many companies, especially small ones, were struggling. Higher raw material expenses translated into layoffs or reduced output. And let's not forget, export-reliant industries suffered heavily from retaliatory tariffs. Net job loss was, statistically speaking, significant.
Yeah, but some industries gained, right? Like steel? They cleaned up with less competition. And how many industries finally had to step up their game, innovate, or diversify? That, long-term, helps the U.S. economy hold its ground, you know.
True, diversification and innovation are bright spots, but they came at a cost. Think about agriculture. Retaliatory tariffs hit farmers hard, reduced exports, financial strain, you name it. And then we have consumers. You've got higher prices across groceries to gadgets. They started buying less or opting for substitutes. Consumer spending, which fuels our economy, stalled significantly.
Right. But let's not act like all this wasn't avoidable. The country's been too reliant on imports, from like everywhere. Tariffs shook things up, and yeah, folks felt it. But are we stronger for it? Time will tell.
Possibly, but one can't ignore how GDP growth slowed down in both the US and globally during this period. Trade uncertainty discouraged investments. This isn't just about shaking things up, it's about the after effects, and they hit hard. It's clear that the fallout from tariffs wasn't limited to just one corner of the economy. Now, when we narrow it down to specific sectors, manufacturing stands out as one of the hardest hit. Companies were grappling with increased costs for essential components. Take Boeing, for example. They faced supply chain disruptions and higher material costs, which significantly impacted their production cycles.
Yeah, but weren't they cozy with overseas suppliers for way too long? I'm just saying, they should have seen this coming and prepared, right? Look at the steel and aluminum sectors. Less competition tried to choke them out, but those tariffs gave them some breathing room. Don't hear folks talking about those wins enough.
True, but for every gain there were losses. And let's not forget the tech industry. Tariffs on electronic components drove up production costs for companies making everything from smartphones to semiconductors. Consumers felt it too, higher price tags on their gadgets.
Gotta admit, that's where some cut corners hurt. But it's like this. When you rely on foreign-made parts for decades, you can't flip the switch overnight without some pain. Pain builds discipline, though, doesn't it?
Perhaps. But agriculture is another story altogether. Retaliatory tariffs from trade partners, especially China, closed key markets for US farmers. Soybean and corn exports from the Midwest took massive hits. Demand dropped, and with it, prices, plunging many farmers into dire financial situations.
Farmers got hit, no argument there. Midwest struggled like hell, but we've seen resilience out of them before. Plus, they worked out support packages, didn't they? Gotta view it as part of the battlefield. You lose some, you regroup.
Yes, mitigation measures like subsidies were introduced, but they couldn't fully offset the cascading effects. Many small farms struggled to stay afloat amidst supply chain instability and erratic price changes. Between farmers and manufacturers, financial strain wasn't just a short-term issue, it exposed long-term vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities that needed exposing, Vikram. It's messy, I'll give you that, but systems that bend too quick deserve a shakeup. This ain't about comfort zones. It's about sustainability in the long run.
Sure, but sustenance comes at a cost. And while we debate who bore the brunt, these ripple effects still linger in the wider economy. Sectors like these don't recover overnight. While the ripple effects in the US are significant, they are part of a larger global story. China, for example, faced a sharp decline in export demand due to these trade wars. The combination of tariffs and shifting supply chains disrupted industries like consumer electronics and heavy machinery production. The ripple didn't stop there. Europe, particularly Germany's manufacturing sector, struggled with production constraints.
You mean Europe's always been tied at the hip with China? That's no surprise. Heck, Germany banked on cheap labor and materials way too much. Seems like tariffs forced them to rethink their dependencies. Probably should have been doing that years ago.
True, but the disruption led to real challenges. European economies rely heavily on stable global trade flows. The uncertainties created by the trade wars slowed down their growth. And let's not forget the ripple effects on emerging markets. Brazil's agricultural sector, for example, had to battle higher import costs and less demand from trade partners.
Yep, and emerging markets are like, well, they're kind of like supporting players in a global game. When the big dogs fight, the smaller ones get trampled. Inflation hit them hard, didn't it? Plus, Brazil's just scrambling to fill gaps left by U.S. farmers. Ain't exactly a winning strategy.
Inflation was indeed a major issue. Rising import costs meant slower growth and increased financial instability in these economies. And that brings us to the heart of the policy debate. Protectionism has its supporters. It's often framed as a defense of sovereignty and economic independence.
Totally. It's about securing the homeland, Vikram. You can't just open the gates to the whole world and hope it works out. National interest's gotta come first. That's how you win battles. And yeah, sure, there's data saying it ain't all sunshine and rainbows, but protecting your turf is never pain-free.
Fair, but data does matter. Many economists argue that these measures create more harm than good in the long term, reducing trade volume, raising prices, and lowering overall economic efficiency. The trade-offs aren't always obvious or immediate, but they shape futures.
Futures that mean getting folks to stop relying on quick fixes. Look, this whole thing ain't about perfect solutions. It's just the reality of keeping your economy toughened up. Pain's part of that deal.
And the reality is complex, balancing sovereignty with interdependence, short-term disruptions with long-term gains. These are the challenges we face. The trade wars have certainly reshaped global trade dynamics, but only time will tell if the benefits outweigh the costs.
Time will tell, yeah. And that's the thing, Vikram. This battle ain't just about numbers. It's about principles, survival, and making sure the U.S. can stand tall on its own 2 feet.
On that note, it's clear the economic ripples from these policies aren't going away anytime soon. Thanks for joining us today. It's been a thought-provoking conversation.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the next one. See y'all out there.